Okay, and then why is that important? Why does it really matter? Well, it turns out that the adrenal glands, or you could also say this as our hormonal system, our stress response, is a centerpiece in all these different body activities. So if you look at it, the upper right-hand corner, cortisol plays a huge role in the brain, neural tissue health, right? You know that if you flood the hippocampus part of the brain with high levels of cortisol, it literally kills and destroys brain cells, chews them up. Go to the lower right-hand corner, cortisol is playing this dance with insulin. It's a glucocorticosteroid, right? It's controlling blood sugar along with insulin. When cortisol levels shoot up, thyroid hormone levels are immediately downregulated. You've got cortisol levels going up, you're going to have a depletion of progesterone. So you get sex hormones and thyroid and blood sugar problems all kind of tied into this. And you go to the middle bottom of the diagram, you'll see, and this is late night TV. You see these shows, right? Like Cortate or Cortislim, or different like cortisol lowering products to help you lose body fat. Because when cortisol gets messed up, we store body fat in and around the abdominal organs to protect ourselves, which is highly functional and a great survival mechanism, but unsightly, I guess. Especially if you live in California, you want to wear a bathing suit. You don't want a whole bunch of abdominal belly fat. Cortisol, lower left-hand corner, has a role in detox capacity. You go up a notch there, you can see cortisol also plays a role in eicosanoid modulation. It has this cortisol, cortisone, really strong anti-inflammatory role, right? Upper left-hand corner, again, cortisol is a glucocorticosteroid. It helps stabilize blood sugar, playing with insulin back and forth. And then in the middle of the upper part of the diagram, you think of cortisol like with all the itises, right? The bursitis, tendinitis, myofasciitis, because it's anti-inflammatory. So it has a really strong role in connective tissue. If you're working with athletes in terms of how they recover, people who are prone to injury, people who are in a lot of pain, that's related to, musculoskeletal type syndromes, and also plays a role in bone turnover. I mean, it kind of does a little bit of everything. And when the cortisol to DHEA ratio is out of balance, the only question becomes is which one of these little bubbles is going to take the hit? Is your thyroid or your sex hormone levels going to drop? Are you going to have the bursitis, tendinitis, myofasciitis? Are you going to have a brain problem, which would be sleep or memory or depression? Where's it going to go and what's going to happen? I'm very fascinated by the connection between stress and depression as well. There's a researcher here near me at Stanford University, Robert Sapolsky, who's devoted his whole career towards that, one of the great neuroscientists of his generation. Stress and depression is a huge connection. Yep. Any of you guys are interested in Sapolsky's work, I can get connected with him, some of his videos and whatnot, and his books. So the causes of adrenal fatigue, right? And again, it's simple because I always try to teach classes and practitioners with the exact same language that you all would want to use when you're working with your patients. So rather than like talking about cytochrome P450 pathways, we talk about a toxic liver. Rather than talking about glucocorticosteroid inhibition of conversion of active T3 to inactive T blah blah blah, we talk about weight gain. So we try to keep it really simple. And so when you're looking at the causes of adrenal fatigue, it took me about 12 years to come up with this. And I know it looks easy, but it took a long time. There's 3 causes of adrenal fatigue that are primary: emotional, dietary, and inflammatory. Boom, boom, boom. Most people, when you start to talk to them for a while, have all 3. And so if you can reduce something so complex down to something simple, then patients can get enrolled and understand what you're talking about, and that gets them excited, and that makes them want to do the lab testing. When, in my earlier years, my first years of practice, I talked about cytochrome P450 pathways, and I talked about inhibition of active and inactive thyroid hormones, people just glazed over and didn't understand what I was saying and didn't understand how it related to them. So I really want to always have us explain functional medicine and talk about functional medicine to each other and to our patients in a language that's easy to understand and applicable so that people want to do the testing. Okay, so emotional, dietary, and inflammatory stress. Those are the 3 major reasons why you would have a problem with your adrenal glands. And most people have all 3. And it's in that order. Okay, so in a perfect world, and I guess a perfect world does exist, we see normal people with adrenals once in a while, and you would wake up in the morning and your cortisol would be at its peak, around 20 units with the labs that we measure. And then at night, right before you go to bed, it would be down around a 2. And so nature has designed what is really, the more you study it, the more amazing it becomes. Just the absolute most beautiful, perfect rhythm you could imagine, linked into our exposure to light and dark. It's functional. It allows us to get to the ecstasy that you would achieve in meditation. It allows us to build bridges and dams and roads and sports cars. It allows us to take care of children. I mean, this rhythm is like the heart of human civilization. We wake up when the sun comes up. We're busy during the day. Our cortisol levels are peaking. You can see how high they are in the early morning hours. And then by nighttime, they're down. And we're turning off our email. We're getting away from our cell phones. We're going back into rest and recovery. So it is a beautiful rhythm. The more tied into this exact rhythm you are, the healthier you're going to be. And what we're doing with the labs is measuring where people stand in relation to this rhythm and then resetting them back to this natural rhythm. That is the goal, resetting them back to this natural rhythm. And it's a fun and interesting project. So think about the adrenals when they're healthy. You get lean people. They're burning their body fat appropriately. They're not storing it. You got great energy levels. You wake up in the morning. You want to get a lot of things done. You got a great mood. Unless something bad happens. I mean, if something bad happens, you shouldn't be happy. But, the default setting is a great mood. You have a wonderful immune response in your whole body as well as your GI tract. For women and for men both, sex hormone levels are good. Sex drive is good. And then what we see with the bulk of our clients, right, is this scenario, which is that we've got fatigue. We've got depression, weight gain, female hormone issues, digestive problems, allergies, cravings, pain, not great immune responses, people that don't sleep well, they're irritable, anxious, they can't concentrate, their memories aren't that great, right? And this is, kind of modern life wearing us down, pulling the adrenals down. And these are the kinds of issues that we can correct with a simple adrenal test. So it's a very, very widespread application to any of those conditions. So in a normal world, you would be in the normal box, all right? And in the normal world, your cortisol levels would go up on a rough day. They come back down on a day off. On a day where you're just lying around, you're not doing anything, your cortisol might dip a little lower. On a day where you have to give a presentation to 10,000 people, your cortisol might be extremely high. But the key is that you're bouncing up and down in the normal box there. Okay? Now, over time, what happens is that you can enter into what we call stage 1. Stage 1 means the cortisol levels have gone up and they've stayed up for so long, and you've been stressed so consistently for so long that shut-off mechanism is no longer working. So now your cortisol levels are high every day, even on a rest day. And then eventually that stage 1 progresses to stage 2 and a stage 3, where the adrenal glands start to burn out and cortisol levels drop lower and lower. Symptoms get more and more severe as cortisol levels drop out. And the lab testing shows us exactly where in the scale the person is. Okay, now this is my favorite diagram of all time. I know it's a little confusing, but it really just shows, it answers so many questions all at the same time, okay? So we've got the HPA axis, and you can see there hypothalamus, pituitary adrenal axis, HPA axis. That's basically saying the brain communicating with the adrenal glands. Right-hand side, you've got the brain communicating with the thyroid. So notice that this is all about the brain. So we call it adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout. A more accurate way of saying that would be to say HPA axis dysregulation or HPA axis dysfunction. Or if you want to speak in English, you would say, hey, your brain isn't controlling your hormones properly anymore. Your brain has seen too much. Your brain has been under stress for long enough. It doesn't know how to reset and bring things back down to where they should be. So at some deeper level, if you want to get a little metaphysical with all this stuff, or if you really want to delve into the biochemistry, it's really a brain-related problem. And that's why Patrick Kennedy picked up the phone and called me and invited me to this neuroscience conference, because he understood at a deep level that, there's something going on here there's more to all this than just giving people antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs and trying to treat people for all these various neurological, brain-related problems. That stress is a big component in these different issues that are really, really common with people that we're working with. Okay, so think about it this way. When the brain is under stress, it tells the adrenal glands to make more cortisol. There's normally a feedback loop that now the stress is over, and the brain then tells the adrenal glands, okay, chill out. It's over. The tiger is gone. You don't have to run anymore. The war is over. You don't have to fight anymore, and you can reset. But when you're under stress continually, that normal shutoff mechanism, that normal sort of preventive relief valve that resets breaks. And then you have HPA axis dysfunction. Okay, so now if you look at this, the lower middle of the slide, you'll see there's this little inhibition loop. So as soon as your cortisol gets messed up, you see how there's an inhibition of conversion of thyroid hormones. And there's another inhibitory loop that goes over to TSH. It's a little higher up there. So again, as soon as cortisol is involved, thyroid gets involved. And you, as a rule, are going to have some level of thyroid issue with all your adrenal patients as well. Okay? So when we're thinking about thyroid, we want to determine, is it a primary thyroid problem or secondary? So the way that Dr. Timmons used to define that, this is the way I was taught, was a secondary thyroid problem means that the thyroid is out of balance strictly because cortisol is out of balance. When we correct cortisol, the thyroid bounces back, the thyroid problem is done. A primary thyroid problem means that outside of any issues with cortisol, the thyroid has a primary issue all in and of itself, which needs to be treated separately. So one of the things we try to determine, and this is complex, is the thyroid problem primary and need to be addressed, or is it an adrenal-related problem? And we can fix it from the adrenal side. All right, so here's my second favorite diagram. So we thought about how the brain regulates stress hormones and how it's really a brain problem. Now, if we want to get down to the level of the hormones, here's what's happening on a biochemical level. When we're under stress, you can see pregnenolone, the little red arrows, converts over to cortisol. All right? And pregnenolone going over to cortisol in a continual day in and day out way will deplete the ability of the body to have pregnenolone go down towards DHEA, estrogen, and testosterone. So you see that big circle with the X. Yeah? So when we're under stress, we make a lot of cortisol. Progesterone, DHEA, estrogen, and testosterone levels all then drop. So when you see patients that have progesterone, testosterone, estrogen, or even DHEA level problems, any of the sex hormone problems, you're going to, most of the time have someone who has an adrenal issue that's underlying all that. Right? And that's super, super important because if we can fix cortisol and DHEA, stop this pregnenolone steal, they call it, this diversion of pregnenolone, then it's going to make a huge, huge difference in terms of how people respond. And where I'm not against, I have no problems with people using progesterone, estrogen, even testosterone if they need it, but you always want to address the underlying mechanisms that are triggering these problems as well as treat the actual sex hormones themselves. Another diagram, kind of the same thing, but looked at it in a different way. Again, you can see how when we're under stress, cortisol levels go up. Pregnenolone then does not convert into DHEA, estrogen, and testosterone. So we never want to do sex hormone treatments by themselves. We always want to combine it with an adrenal protocol.